Imagine a journey where the destination is not just a place, but a story that was first written more than a century ago and still sleeps today beneath the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic. This is the story of the Titanic, but what I'm about to tell you is not about the Titanic itself. It's about a new chapter written in its shadow, a chapter called Titan, June 2023. A remote stretch of the North Atlantic Ocean where the winds are sharp but the surface of the sea is deceptively calm. Beneath that calm lies a darkness that sinks almost 4 kilometers deep, a darkness where sunlight dies and pressure rules. And into that darkness, a small vessel, the Titan Submersible, begins its descent. Its mission: to visit the wreckage of the Titanic, to study its remains, to touch history, and to offer an experience that only a handful of people on Earth have ever had. The price of the ticket, $250,000 per seat, but the real price of this journey was 5 human lives. The Titan was no ordinary submersible, 22 feet long, with a carbon fiber hull, titanium end caps, and just enough space inside for 5 people to sit tightly packed together. The pilot's seat wasn't a traditional helm, it was controlled by a modified video game controller. No windows except for one small porthole at the front. The only view came from a screen showing the live feed from the vessel's cameras. Ocean Gate CEO Stockton Rush called it a game changer. Industry experts called it an experiment. And when experiments happen in the deep ocean, risk is never just theory, it's reality. On this dive, 5 people were inside Titan. Stockton Rush himself was piloting. Alongside him was Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Suleiman. Suleiman, a bright, ambitious student, a cricket lover, wasn't excited about the trip at first. But for Father's Day, he decided to join his father. Then there was Hamish Harding, a British billionaire and thrill seeker who had been to space and broken aviation records. And finally, Paul Henry Nargeolet, a French Titanic expert who had been to the wreck dozens of times before. That morning, from the deck of the Polar Prince, the support ship Titan was lowered into the water. Everything went according to plan. The descent began, the depth meter ticking down 10 feet, 50 feet, 10 feet. The water grew colder, darker. The light faded completely. Inside Titan, only the glow of the control screen and the dim cabin lights remained. Contact with the surface was steady, but after just 1 hour and 45 minutes, the connection stopped. The crew on the surface thought it might be a communications glitch. Titan could send short text messages through an acoustic link, but no messages came. The tracking signal, an underwater beacon, also went silent. It was as if Titan had vanished into thin air, or in this case, into a black void of ocean. To understand what might have happened, you have to understand the rules of the deep. The deeper you go, the higher the pressure. At the depth of the Titanic wreck, 500 feet, the pressure is over 600 pounds per square inch. That's hundreds of times greater than at the surface. A pinhole leak at that depth would instantly tear wide open. And if the hull failed completely, the result would be a catastrophic implosion so fast, the human brain wouldn't even register it before death. On the Polar Prince, worry turned to panic. The U.S. Coast Guard was alerted. Canadian authorities deployed aircraft. Sonar buoys were dropped into the ocean. The news spread worldwide. And with it came the clock. Titan had only 96 hours of oxygen on board. Every hour, every minute was critical. Headlines read, 72 hours left, then 48 hours, then 24 hours. Families prayed, the world watched, and somewhere in that watching, the memory of the Titanic returned. 1912, the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic. The largest, most luxurious ship in the world, labeled unsinkable. A late-night collision with an iceberg. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, it was gone. Over 1,500 lives lost. In 1912, rescue came too late, and now 111 years later, the Titanic was once again at the heart of a rescue effort, but this time it was 5 people trapped in the deep, near its rusting remains. Ocean Gate's Titan had already faced safety concerns. Experts had warned that carbon fiber was not an ideal material for such extreme depths. No independent agency had certified the submersible. But Stockton Rush brushed off the criticism, saying, "Breaking rules is what leads to innovation. Safety is just pure waste." When the media replayed those words after the disappearance, they sounded less like ambition and more like a haunting prophecy. 4 days passed. Oxygen was nearly gone. The Coast Guard refused to give up, saying, "We search until all hope is lost." Remotely operated vehicles ROV were sent down into the debris field of the Titanic. And then, a chilling discovery: metallic fragments on the seafloor, the landing frame, the tail cone, all belonging to Titan. The official statement was brief: "We believe Titan suffered a catastrophic implosion in less than a blink of an eye." It was over, no struggle, no last messages, just instant destruction under unimaginable pressure. The remains of the passengers would likely never be recovered. For the families, it was the worst kind of news. Suleiman's story broke hearts around the world. A young man who was afraid of the trip, but went anyway just to be with his father, and never came back. Stockton Rush, the man who prided himself on breaking the rules, perished in the very machine he built. Hamish Harding, who had reached the edge of space, met his end at the bottom of the sea. And Paul Henry Nargeolet, the guardian of the Titanic, would now rest forever beside it. But the story doesn't end there. The newly released investigative report has revealed what happened behind the scenes. Engineers had warned Stockton Rush that repeated dives would create micro cracks in the carbon fiber hull. Each dive would weaken the structure, and eventually one dive would be the last. Internal emails even carried this chilling prediction: "This design will eventually kill someone." Rush's reply was blunt: "You have to take risks or stay in bed." And reading those words, one thing becomes clear. In 1912, Titanic's passengers were told, "This ship is unsinkable." In 2023, Titan's passengers were told, "This submersible is safe." But the ocean does not know the meaning of unsinkable. The ocean has only one set of rules, and those who break them never return. The sea has a long memory. Every wave that rises, every current that drifts, carries the whispers of stories that once played out upon its surface and sank beneath it. To truly understand what happened to Titan, you must go back more than a century to another voyage that ended in silence. It was April 10, 1912. The RMS Titanic stood gleaming at the docks of Southampton, England. The largest ship the world had ever seen, a marvel of engineering. Her decks shone with polished wood and brass. First-class passengers enjoyed private promenades, dining rooms dripping with chandeliers, and cabins as grand as hotel suites. She was called unsinkable. The press wrote it. The passengers believed it. The crew carried themselves with the confidence of men who knew they were part of history. 4 days into her maiden voyage, on the night of April 14th, the sea was calm. The sky was clear. There was no moon, only a canopy of stars. At 11:40 p.m., a sharp lookout's bell rang from the crow's nest iceberg right ahead. Engines roared into reverse. The wheel turned hard to port. But the Titanic's massive hull was too slow to respond. The iceberg scraped along her starboard side, opening a series of wounds beneath the waterline. Water poured in. In the next 2 hours and 40 minutes, the ship's fate was sealed. Lifeboats, too few for everyone aboard, were lowered half, full in the confusion. The band played on to keep passengers calm. Women and children were ushered to safety. Men stood back, some lighting cigarettes, some staring into the dark horizon where no rescue lights appeared. By 2:20 a.m., the Titanic's stern rose into the air, and with a groan that some survivors swore they could feel in their bones, she slipped beneath the surface, 1,500 lives lost. The wreck lay undiscovered for 73 years until 1985, when a joint American-French expedition finally found it, split in two, resting in eternal darkness. From that moment, the Titanic became more than a shipwreck. It became a ghost, drawing explorers, historians, and dreamers into its orbit. And perhaps it drew the Titan as well. Now, in 2023, Titan approached the same grave. But unlike the Titanic, which was built of steel riveted together, Titan was a patchwork of modern materials, titanium end caps, a carbon fiber hull. It looked sleek, innovative, but the ocean doesn't care about sleek. In the years before the fatal dive, there were warning signs. Test dives had caused creaks, groans, the unsettling noises of a hull under stress. Experts in submersible design said the material choice was dangerous. Carbon fiber could weaken over time under repeated pressure cycles. In private meetings, engineers told Stockton Rush that every dive was adding microscopic damage you couldn't see. But that would one day lead to sudden failure. But Rush had a vision. He saw himself not as a cautious captain, but as an innovator, a pioneer who was willing to do what others feared. If you want absolute safety, he once told an interviewer, stay in bed. He believed the risk was worth the reward. And that belief would take 5 lives into the deep. On June 18, 2023, the dive began at 8 a.m. The plan was simple: descend for about 2 hours, spend time at the wreck, then ascend. Communication checks were made. The Titan slipped beneath the waves at 9:45 a.m. Contact was lost. No warning, no distress call. On the Polar Prince, the crew tried again and again to raise Titan. Nothing. Minutes became hours. The reality set in. They were blind. Somewhere below, in a silent, freezing world, 5 people were either stranded or gone. The U.S. Coast Guard took the lead. Aircraft swept over the site. They dropped sonar buoys, listening for any sound: the clang of metal, the thud of human effort. The Canadian military joined in. France sent assistance. For 4 days the world held its breath. Every news broadcast showed the same graphic, a clock counting down the remaining oxygen. 72 hours, 48 hours, 24 hours, and then 0. Still, the search continued, driven by that stubborn human hope that maybe, just maybe, the submersible was intact, stuck somewhere, and the crew clinging to life. Inside the families' hearts, that hope burned painfully bright. In Pakistan, friends of the Dawood family gathered for prayers. In Britain, Harding's friends shared messages urging the search teams not to give up. Stockton Rush's own relatives defended his vision, saying he believed in pushing the limits of exploration. But the ocean, it does not bargain. On June 22nd at 8:55 a.m., a remotely operated vehicle sent back an image from the seafloor. It showed a twisted metal frame, broken apart, lying in the sediment not far from the Titanic's bow. Soon more pieces were found: the tail cone, a section of the hull. The verdict was unavoidable. Titan had suffered a catastrophic implosion. The Coast Guard explained it in simple terms: the pressure at that depth crushed the sub instantly. There would have been no warning, no pain. One moment there was a vessel, the next it was fragments drifting down in silence. The report now tells us the truth, that the implosion happened just as Titan neared its destination. They were within sight of the Titanic's grave. The irony is cruel. They reached the place they came for, but only as part of its legacy of loss. The ocean floor where the Titanic rests is not a friendly place. It is a realm of perpetual night, where temperatures hover near freezing, where the weight of the water above is so immense that the human mind struggles to imagine it. Down here, steel buckles, glass shatters. Even light itself struggles to exist. The new report reconstructs Titan's final moments. As the submersible descended, its sensors would have been monitoring depth and hull integrity. But here's the truth: At nearly 12,000 feet, the carbon fiber shell was not just holding back the pressure, it was fighting against every previous dive it had endured. Each mission before this one had left invisible scars within the fibers. Tiny fractures, micro bubbles of air trapped between the layers. At a certain point, no one can predict with certainty, the material stopped resisting, it collapsed. The implosion was instantaneous. In less than 40 milliseconds, faster than the human brain can process, the entire structure crumpled inward. The temperature inside would have briefly spiked to thousands of degrees as the hull snapped, and the surrounding water rushed in at supersonic speed. For the 5 people inside, there was no time to understand what was happening, no final words, no panic, just darkness and then nothing. Above on the polar prints, the moment passed unnoticed. The crew only knew that the signal had gone silent. They could not know that miles below, the journey had already ended. When the debris was found, it was scattered over a small area, a cruel sign that the vessel had been destroyed instantly and completely. No human remains were visible at that pressure. Biology is as fragile as steel. The ocean had claimed them entirely. The report points to one conclusion: the Titan's design was flawed from the start. OceanGate had ignored multiple safety protocols that every other deep-sea expedition follows. No third-party certification, no full-scale pressure testing. Warnings from engineers had been brushed aside. Stockton Rush had believed that innovation meant breaking rules, and he convinced others to share that belief. But the ocean is not a place where rules can be bent. It is not just the tragedy that haunts this story, it is the echo of history. In 1912, the Titanic's designers claimed she was unsinkable. In 2023, Titan's builders insisted she was safe. Both were wrong, and both learned the truth in the same place, beneath the same cold waters. Today, the wreck of the Titanic still lies in silence, its iron bones slowly dissolving into the black. And now, just a short distance away, the fragments of Titan rest, a modern ghost among the relics of an older one. 2 disasters, separated by more than a century, bound by the same ocean and the same fatal human flaw, overconfidence. There will be debates, lawsuits, safety reforms. Other explorers will still dream of touching the Titanic's deck with their own eyes. But for many, the Titan disaster will remain a warning, a reminder that there are places on this planet that do not forgive mistakes and never give second chances. The sea keeps its secrets. It kept the Titanics for 73 years. It will keep Titans too, and as the currents swirl quietly over their resting place, the ocean whispers the same lesson it has whispered for centuries. You may visit me, you may marvel at my depths, but you are here only as long as I allow you, and if you stay too long, I will keep you. When the news finally broke, it spread like a cold wave across the world. 5 lives lost, no survivors, no last messages. The ocean had taken them without ceremony, without warning, without mercy. For the families, it was a grief without a body to bury. There would be no funeral with a casket, no chance to see their loved ones one last time. The only closure was the knowledge, or perhaps the hope, that death had come instantly, without pain. But for a mother, a son, a wife, such thoughts are only thin blankets against the freezing wind of loss. In Karachi, in London, in Washington, vigils were held. People lit candles, placed flowers, and stared at photographs of faces that would never smile again. On social media, the names of the passengers trended for days, not as statistics, but as human stories. A billionaire adventurer, a father and son bound by a shared dream, a French Titanic expert who had spent decades telling the ship's story, and the man who had built Titan himself. And yet, alongside the grief, there was anger. Anger at the recklessness, anger at the lack of oversight, anger at the arrogance of pushing technology beyond its limits without respect for the forces of nature. The new investigative report gave shape to that anger. It was not an accident in the purest sense of the word. It was preventable. Engineers had warned Ocean Gate years earlier that the carbon fiber hull was unsafe for repeated deep dives. Industry experts had refused to certify the vessel. Even former employees had raised alarms and been dismissed. The report described a culture within Ocean Gate where dissent was discouraged, where confidence was valued over caution, where risk was not just accepted, but embraced as part of the brand. In meetings, Stockton Rush had reportedly said, "Safety is pure waste." To him, innovation meant breaking rules, but the ocean does not bend to human definitions of progress. After the report was released, lawsuits began to surface. Families demanded answers, governments promised inquiries, and deep-sea exploration companies distanced themselves from Ocean Gate. But in the quiet moments away from cameras and headlines, there was only the silence of the Atlantic, and the knowledge that somewhere, 500 feet below, the story had ended long before the world even knew it had begun. Yet there is a strange gravity to tragedies like this. They pull us in. We tell the story again and again, not because we enjoy the darkness, but because we are trying to understand it. The Titanic disaster in 1912 was replayed for more than a century in books, films, and documentaries. Now, Titan's fate joins that same narrative, woven into the mythology of the deep. It is a warning carved into the abyss. Human ambition can reach for the ocean floor, but the ocean will always have the final word. The Atlantic does not forget. It remembers every ship, every soul, every mistake that has ever sunk beneath its waves. It is patient, it waits, and when it takes completely. 111 years ago, the Titanic struck an iceberg and vanished into this same black water. That night, more than 1,500 lives were lost, and the world promised to learn from it. We promised better safety, better technology, better judgment, and yet, here we are again, another vessel. Another dream, another set of lives swallowed whole by the same unforgiving sea. The Titan did not meet its end because of a storm, or a freak accident, or bad luck. It ended because human beings believed that rules could be bent, that nature could be negotiated with, that engineering pride was stronger than the laws of physics. But down here, there are no shortcuts. Down here, the pressure is not a suggestion, it is an unbreakable truth. Some will call the 5 who died explorers, others will call them reckless. Perhaps both are true. They knew the risks, but they also believed in the thrill of touching the unreachable. In that way, they were no different from the passengers who boarded Titanic in 1912, convinced they were part of something historic. Now, the Titan rests in pieces on the ocean floor, not far from the ship it came to visit. 2 tragedies separated by a century, lying side by side in eternal darkness. Iron and carbon fiber, past and present, both united by silence, and maybe that is the real message here. The ocean doesn't care about our money, our ambition, our dreams, or our technology. It doesn't care about how famous you are or how much you paid for a seat. It doesn't care about the promises of engineers or the confidence of billionaires. The ocean is older than us, stronger than us, and in the end, it always wins. As we tell this story, the currents still move quietly over the wreckage. No light will ever reach that place. No diver will ever bring them back. And somewhere in that endless dark, the sea whispers the same warning it has whispered since the beginning of time. You may visit me, you may marvel at my depths, but remember, you are only a guest, and if you forget that, I will make you stay.